Season 3 of The Gilded Age is progressing swiftly. The drama is already as high as ever in the back half. In a different world, Episode 5, Marian and Larry became engaged, Gladys was having a hard time adjusting to her new life, and the Russells' marriage was starting to show signs of strain. However, as each character deals with the fallout from their deeds, if you want to cook an omelette, the 6th episode intensifies the strain on all fronts. Oscar confronts the person who destroyed him, Bertha witnesses the life she has thrown Gladys into, and Peggy is compelled to acknowledge the reality of her history. Given that Bertha forced her daughter into marriage, it's safe to conclude that Gladys and Bertha's relationship has been difficult this season. However, in the most recent episode, Bertha ultimately supports Gladys. Following last week's tension between Gladys and Sarah, Bertha shows up to teach Gladys how to take charge of the household. Although Sarah is reluctant to resign, she finds her counterpart in Bertha. In addition to embarrassing Sarah over her decision to terminate Gladys' maid and bringing up politics with her over dinner, Bertha teaches Gladys how to handle her own problems. She advises Gladys to become indispensable, reminding her that only Hector has the power to force Sarah to go. Gladys accomplishes this by becoming involved with the estate, which is often managed by Sarah. After dinner, Gladys publicly criticizes Sarah's actions when her sister-in-law steps up to take the Duchess' place and stands first. Bertha also steps in by drawing Hector's attention to the problem and suggesting that he reinstate Adelheid and value Gladys. By the time Bertha departs England, Gladys is in a better position than she was prior to the visit, and Hector is also more conscious of the drama. Before Bertha returns home to New York, Church is keen to find out who is giving the media information on the Russells, but Bruce is the one who suggests a suspect. Bruce thinks Miss Andre, Bertha's lady's maid, is the culprit after looking over the data and comparing who would have access to it, but she still needs evidence. George isn't at the residence in the meantime. He visits J.P. Morgan, who has made arrangements to welcome George, the Merrick brothers, and Sage, all of whom own a portion of the Illinois Central Railroad, in an attempt to resolve his turbulent financial agreement. Morgan intends to keep them all together until someone acquires the majority stake, and it appears to be successful because the Merricks agree to a deal with George in order to get even with Sage. However, that would be too tidy a conclusion. The main issue is that Clay, who Sage recruited, is aware of all George's secrets from their previous connection and tells the media about George's financial status. George's predicament worsens as his company's shares plummet and the Merricks back out of the agreement. However, George would rather see his business fail than allow the other man to succeed. Therefore, Sage's scheme to acquire the controlling share fails. Marian and Larry ultimately become engaged after a protracted courtship, but their joyous celebration is short-lived. Marian notices something is wrong when praising Jack because the footman simply forgets the name of the place where Larry took him to celebrate. Jack tries to hide Larry's deception, but Marian discovers that Larry was at a notorious establishment while interviewing Oscar. Marian decides she no longer wants to marry Larry after becoming upset by this disclosure and the fact that he lied about it. She leaves a letter at his residence expressing her feelings, but he doesn't know what has transpired. Because Larry is in Morenci for George and is unable to protect himself, the situation rapidly gets out of control. Larry succeeds there, though, as his research reveals that the mines are worth far more than his father initially believed. As she goes home from her interview, fearing the explanation she must give William following their run-in with T. Thomas Fortune at the train station, Peggy, like Marian, suffers romantically. However, following Marian's counsel, she tells William the truth about her relationship with Fortune and vows to stay away from him going forward. William is showing Peggy how much he cares by forgiving her. She makes an effort to tell them more, but William maintains that he is more interested in the future than in her history. William requests his mother be invited to a suffrage meeting in New York after Peggy's interview persuaded Frances Ellen Watkins Harper to hold one. However, he fails to disclose the purpose of the meeting to Mrs. Kirkland, causing her to argue against women's suffrage during the event and clash with Peggy. William is then informed by Mrs. Kirkland that she doesn't believe Peggy has the time to be a wife. Peggy, meantime, bemoans Mrs. Kirkland's attitude to her own mother. Peggy does, however, admit her emotions for William, which heightens the difficulty of the barrier his mother stands for. Season 3 has seen chaos in the Van Ryn home due to Agnes and Ada's fight, Jack's success, and Ada's attempt to get in touch with her late husband. However, since Ada's narrative first came out, things have partly stabilized. Ada returns to Madame Dashkova in the most recent episode with the intention of chatting with Luke, but she realizes something is strange when Dashkova tells her that Luke is speaking to her in Italian. Ada realizes she has been duped when Dashkova calls her husband Luca, which was a misspelling of his name in the newspaper, and leaves. Even though it is a devastating blow to her feelings, Ada stops being controlled, which should pave the way for more positive future plotlines. Jack isn't ready to quit his job, therefore he is still keeping the money he made from the sale of the clock a secret. However, because of Mrs. Bauer's mistake, the information is already circulating. When Agnes finds out that the clock was sold, she decides to find out how much Jack got. Armstrong makes it easy for her by claiming that Jack's constant presence makes the other slaves laugh. Agnes wants Ada to release Jack after learning that he now possesses $300,000. Oscar's agreement that Jack should no longer serve as their footman persuades her to speak with him. Ada tells him it's time to find his place in the world, that she still encourages his achievement. Thus, Jack bids the other staff farewell with tears in his eyes and promises to stay in touch. However, he leaves a note for everyone, giving Armstrong a present and kindly repaying those who helped pay his patent cost. Jack has moved on to his new life with this twist, but it's still unknown what that will entail for him. Oscar is resolved to confront the lady who defrauded him of the Van Ryn fortune after Mountbatten was reintroduced in the previous episode. He pays her a visit at the place where Larry found her and finds out how bleak her life has become. Maud discloses that she was left penniless and working at the Haymarket when her companion Crowther took the money she had stolen from Oscar. Oscar becomes sympathetic for Maud after realizing her plight and letting go of his rage. To show how much Oscar has changed, he even assists her by buying her a train ticket and gives her $100 so she can leave the city and stay with her sister. John Adams later commends Oscar for his decision, but in a startling cliffhanger, a trolley runs over John as the two are preparing to resume regaining Oscar's business. Despite his increased maturity, it appears Oscar will still be subjected to abuse.